Welcome to today's presentation on Mastering U.S. Legal Descriptions. My name is Alice Hogue and I'll be your instructor. So today what we're doing is we're looking at the process, the way land is described in the United States, and we're also going to look at the history of how those land descriptions came to be, and then finally we'll look at those calculating legal descriptions. Now what you see before you is a typical map or a plat. And you can see here they have the designations 5 north, 5 west, and then here's 5 north, 4 west, and here's 4 north, 4 west, and 4 north, 5 west. So this is a typical map that would be used either by a landman as he's going. The areas in yellow are typically designated as leased areas. And so that is, they have run a title examination to see what's open of record. That means which land is unleased. So you may be trying to lease all the lands that are unleased. And so these are the legal descriptions. These legal descriptions are important because that's what's going to go in the oil and gas lease. And it's got to be done correctly or the whole lease could be invalid. So this could be the initial map that geology hands to the landman, or to check if anything is open of record. Or it could be a working map the landman is using. So that is the introduction. So now let's look at what our agenda is going to look like. We're going to start with an introduction. I just want you to understand the impact of how important a legal description is. Legal descriptions are they're not difficult. They're really not. But it's very easy to get confused. And so we'll talk about the impact of not getting it just right. And then from there, I want to give you a little bit of a history. Now, we're going to talk about the different types of legal descriptions while we're talking about the history. But beginning with what we call the metes and bounds descriptions. That is the system of land management that was brought over from England. So metes and bounds was from England, and so when the original Pilgrims settled in 1620, that's the system that they brought with them. But over the years, the system switched from metes and bounds to congressional, or the rectangular survey system. And I want you to understand why there was a switch and what the advantages of this new congressional survey system or rectangular survey system. And then we'll conclude with how properties are calculated and how acreage is platted out. And then we'll wrap up with a conclusion. So let's begin with the importance of an accurate legal description. So the wording in the oil and gas lease or in any instrument of conveyance of property has to be sufficient so that a surveyor can identify that property on the ground. If you lease property that is incorrectly described or inaccurately described, this is the #1 mistake that's made in conveyance instrument. And it's the most common cause of title failure according to the AAPL. It's the most common cause of title failure is that there's a problem with the wording of the description. Now, when we're talking about a lease, if there is a lease that has an inaccurate legal description, that will void that lease. So the lease is not even effective. Now, if you do this, let's say you put an inaccurate legal description in your lease, you could file what's called a correction lease, where you correct the property description. But if someone leases at the same time as you and they record their instrument and it has the correct legal description, their rights are going to trump yours. So that's going to be the valid lease, even though you had it executed first and even though you had it recorded first. If that property description is inaccurate or incorrect, then that is going to void that oil and gas lease and give someone else the opportunity to come in and to become the leasehold owner. All right, so that's the importance of legal description. So it's critical that we get this right. All right, So now from here, let's just look at a background of land descriptions. And we'll start with the early Pilgrims. This is appropriate. We just finished with Thanksgiving. So as you'll recall, the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620. And this is the actual site where that is located today. I thought that was kind of interesting. But they landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620. And what they did was they just used the system that was there in England. They just took possession of the land. So what would happen as a result was these people would take the best lands, which left a lot of gaps in the land and a lot of unused lands. There were no surveys. There was no recordation laws at that time. So you just took whatever land you needed, and if you wanted to describe it, it would be by a meets and bounds system so that it just looked like a patchwork quilt. It was just all over the place. Now, meets and bounds then is what was used in England, and it is because of that the original 13 colonies are all use a meets and bounds description. The rest of the nation, besides Texas, Texas also uses meets and bounds, the rest of the nation uses this congressional survey system. But because this is what was brought over from England, those original 13 colonies still use this meets and bounds description. Now, meets and bounds stands for literally measurements and boundaries. Meets and bounds, measurements and boundaries. When we talk about the measurements, we're talking about mathematical measurements. So many directions, so many feet, so many degrees, so many minutes, and so many seconds. And then when we're talking about boundaries, we're talking about natural boundaries that are used to describe the land. So it might be landmarks like, so many feet to the tree, and then so many feet to the stream, and then so many feet to the fence, et cetera, et cetera. So it's using these natural boundaries, and then as the boundary part of it, and then the measurement part of it is these degrees. So the measurement is directions. So this is north, south, west, and east. And these are the different degrees here. So this would be 40 east. It's on the east side. So this is a compass that I purchased from this company, Pronto Land Measurement Compass. And even though you're not really going to need to know meets and bounds descriptions, because today we have software that you just plug in the meets and bounds descriptions, and it'll tell you, it'll populate for you where exactly that is. But I think it's important that we know where this came from. Okay, yeah, we can pop it into a software system, but it's kind of like, any kind of math. You really need to know how to do division by hand to really understand it. Yes, you can just pop those numbers into your calculator, but the way you really learn it is to learn the old-fashioned way. So that's what I wanted to do here. I wanted to show you how land is measured in a meets and bounds system by using this Pronto Land Measure Compass. Now, this compass is transparent. And so what you do is you put the center of the compass where your starting point is, and then you put whatever degrees are described in the measurements. So it'll say so many degrees and then so many feet. So this little thing just kind of turns around, and that's how you gauge where your meets and bounds descriptions are. So let's look at an example of that. So this is one that's right out of the American Association of Professional Landmen Land Reference Guide on page 38. So in this particular property description, it's saying beginning at a stake in the southeast corner of the northwest quarter of section 1, the old oak tree bears north 25 degrees, east 100 feet, thence north 60 degrees, west 500 feet to the fence, thence north 60 degrees, east 500 feet to the barn, thence south 0 degrees, east 500 feet to the point of beginning. So that's what a typical meets and bounds description looks like. Now, if I were going to try to find this piece of property, I know that this starts in section 1 because it's telling me at the beginning at a stake in the southeast corner. So there's going to be a stick or a stake in the ground here. in the southeast corner of the northwest quarter, here, right here. And we know that it's in section 1. Now from there, what they're describing is, to make sure you're in the right place, it says the old oak tree bears north 25 degrees, east 100 feet. So I'm going to take this compass and I'm going to put the middle part in the center, and then I'm going to do just what it says. I'm going to go north 25 degrees. So I'm going to take this compass, I'm going to put it on here, and then I'm going to go north 25 degrees. That's going to be right here. Can everybody see this arrow that I'm using? Raise your hand if you can see the arrow. Okay, nobody can see it, it looks like. Oh, some of you can see it. Okay. Well, let me get my pen out. So, can everybody see this? Raise your hand if you can see that. Okay, good. All right, so it says the old oak tree bears north 25 degrees, east 500 feet. So I'm going to take this transparent compass and I'm going to put it on this center line. And to make sure I'm in the right place, I'm going to see where 25 degrees north is. So this is north, and this is going to be 25 degrees. So if I put this compass here, 25 degrees is going to be about right here. So that tells me that I'm in the right place. It's not actually a part of the description. It's just telling me that I'm in the right place. And then from there, from this southeast corner of the northwest quarter, I'm going to go north 60 degrees. So again, putting my compass here, I'm going to go north 60 degrees. North 60 degrees, west 500 feet. So north and west, that's what we're looking for. So north 60 degrees is going to be here. 60 degrees west, that's what this is telling me. So I'm going to spin this little thing around, and 60 degrees west is going to be right here. 60 degrees is going to be right there, and that is going to be the fence. So that arrow is going to go right there. Then the next designation is thence north 60 degrees east. So we're still pointing north, but now we're going to go 60 degrees east. So this is going to be the east side here, and we're going to go 60 degrees. Now what we're doing is, we're moving the compass here, and from there we're going to go 60 degrees east. So this is the east side of the north, and so we're going to go 60 degrees that way, which should get us to here. To the fence, and then north 60 degrees east 500 feet to the barn. So that's going to get us to the barn. And then south 0 degrees, so straight down south, and then east 500 feet. So we're going on the east side here. And that's going to get us to the point of beginning. So one thing they always tell you is you got to be able to make sure that it closes, that the description closes. So this is what a typical meets and bounds description. Like I said, today most landmen have some kind of a software system. And so in that case, they just plug this information into the software system. But I wanted to show you, the old-fashioned way of doing it. Okay, so now that we know the meets and bounds side of it, now let's look at the rectangular survey system. And what I want to do is kind of walk you through a history of U.S. land ownership. Now we've already talked about that this is what the Pilgrims used, because this is what was used in England, the meets and bounds system. But in the United States, for your history lesson for today, there was an act passed by Congress. It was called the Land Ordinance Act of 1785. At that time, the United States Congress had a dilemma on their hand. And the dilemma was that they needed cash. They needed cash because they went into debt to fund the American Revolution. And so now they were having to pay those debts back. This was before there was any federal income tax, so they couldn't, just increase the taxes on the citizens. So they had to come up with a way to pay back their debts. So Thomas Jefferson came up with this idea. Now remember, Thomas Jefferson owned all that property on Monticello in Virginia, and his father happened to be a surveyor. So together, Thomas Jefferson and his father sat down and they came up with this system, this rectangular grid system. And this was presented to Congress by Thomas Jefferson, and it was adopted by the Continental Congress in 1785. And what it said was that henceforth, any new territories are going to be measured under this new system, this public land survey system, often abbreviated as the PLSS. Now, in the land business, I don't really hear it called this public land survey system. I hear it called Jeffersonian, I hear it called congressional, and I hear it called the rectangular survey system. All of these are the same thing. It's this grid system that we're about to go over. But it's called Jeffersonian because it was introduced by Thomas Jefferson, invented by Thomas Jefferson, if you will. It's called congressional because it was passed by the Continental Congress. And it's called the rectangular survey system because it is the grid system. Now, one interesting fact that I found as I did this research was that this now is the most duplicated system of land survey in the world. In the world. Most of the world now does not use metes and bounds. They use this rectangular survey system. This system that was invented by one of our founding fathers, one of the most duplicated systems. So I want you to know this because I want you to understand that when we talk about how to do legal descriptions, this isn't something some landman just came up with in their office and thinking, hey, this is a good idea, and that good idea just was passed on. This was an actual congressional act, and its purpose was to pay off the American Revolutionary War debt. Now, I'm an attorney, and so I believe that one of my pet peeves is attorneys that make the law sound so complicated that you have to be an attorney to understand it. In my opinion, the law is logic. And if you're a logical person, you can understand and read that statute just the way I can read and understand that statute. So with that background, I'd like to give you the language of this Land Ordinance Act of 1785. And what it says is that a surveyor from each state is going to be appointed. And that surveyor is then going to divide the territories into what we call townships. And that township is going to be 6 miles square. That means it's going to be 6 miles this way, 6 miles this way, 6 miles this way, and 6 miles this way. It's going to be 6 miles square. And it's going to be divided by lines that run north-south. This is the township line, also known as the principal meridian. I'll go over that in a minute, principal meridian. And this is the range line. That's others crossing these at right angles. So township and principal meridian goes north-south, and range and baseline is another thing that's called a baseline. A baseline goes east and west. So that was the responsibility. A surveyor had to go out and to actually survey these lands by dividing it up into 6 miles square. Now keep in mind that there was some pressure on the surveyors to do this because the Continental Congress wanted this money right away. And so there was a lot of pressure on these surveyors to not only get appointed, but to as quickly as they could survey those lands so that we could start selling those lands to pay off that debt. Does that sound familiar to anybody? The song remains the same. So the first thing they did was they established these principal meridians, they're called. And this is actually the first principal meridian in the United States. This says the initial point of beginning of the U.S. Public Land Survey System. So this is the first one. It's located on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border between the city of East Liverpool and the borough of Ohioville in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. And it lies on Ohio State Route 39 and Pennsylvania Route 68. So it's on the border between Ohio and Pennsylvania. So these principal meridians were designated by the surveyors that were appointed. And so here is the first principal meridian. This is the one we just talked about on the boundary between Pennsylvania and Ohio. And this is called the Ellicott line, is what it's called, the Ellicott line. So that was the first one that was established. Then from there, every state appointed its own surveyor. So if we look at here, we see this is the first principal meridian here. And then this is the second principal meridian. This is the third principal meridian. This is the fourth principal meridian. And this is the fifth principal meridian. So we're dividing these territories in half, establishing a principal meridian. That's going to be what's called the township line, and then this is going to be the baseline or the range line. So let me show you some other principal meridians. So fifth is going to be through Missouri and Arkansas, and then sixth is going to be here in Kansas. Now, Oklahoma has its own principal meridian that's called the Indian Meridian. And Louisiana has its own meridian, also known as the Louisiana Meridian. Mississippi also has the Chickasaw Meridian. But this is what's happening. Each of these states is appointing, as new territories are brought into the United States, they are surveyed according to this rectangular survey system. The Oklahoma Panhandle has what's called a Cimarron meridian. And this is 6, and so it just goes on from there. But I'm just showing you that each surveyor actually divided each of these states to establish this principal meridian, this north-south line. So then what they did was, once they had their meridian set up, they then followed the language of the Act. And the Act said, working from a principal meridian and baseline, the surveyor marks off the township line into grids of 6 miles square, or 36 square miles. So this is the principal meridian line. So then a baseline was created. So now we have the principal meridian line and the baseline. This is also known as the township line, and this is also known as the range line. So principal meridian or our township. Township here. Oops, township. And this is baseline or range. So what they did then was they had to mark off territories of 6 miles each. And the way they did this, the tools that they used, were these chains. This is the linear measurement that was used by the public lands as prescribed by law. And the way they worked is this entire series was called a chain. And each line in that chain was called a link in the chain. So what the surveyors had to do with their horse was they literally had to use manpower and horsepower to put this in the ground, and then one chain equals 100 links. So this is one chain right there, and that's all of these equal 100 links here. To go 1 mile, you would have to do 80 of these chains, 80 of these whole chains. That would equal a mile. That would be 5,280 feet. So that was a lot of, walking, basically, when you think about doing this 80 times. So this is what they used, and they would have their horses that held the equipment, and they would put this in the, on the ground, and they would walk out, and they would mark off that spot, and then they would pull in the chains that they're using, and then from that designation point go to put their beginning chain there, and then go another chain. And they had to do that 80 times just to equal 1 mile. So what they're charged with doing is they're charged with 6 miles. So 8 times 6, 480 chains just to get to the 6 miles required for the township. So let's look at this, how this worked in actuality. So you have your principal meridian and you have your baseline. Now remember, they were coming from the east. They were coming from Ohio and Pennsylvania. And so once they established that principal meridian line and that baseline, then they knew they needed to get their horse and they needed to start walking out the 6 miles. So they would walk out 6 miles, and then they would make a line, a designation. And then they would start another 6 miles, and then they would mark the line at the end of those 6 miles. Then they would go another 6 miles and mark that line, and you see this would just continue. And then they labeled this, if you think about this being north, south, west, and east, they're labeling this west. So this is going to be 1 west, this is going to be 2 west, 3 west, 4 west. So that's how those designations were created. Now what this surveyor has to do is he now has to go north. So he's now going to, he's now going to go north, and he's going to go 6 miles, starting again from this principal meridian and baseline, and then mark his spot. And then he's going to go another 6 miles, mark that spot, and another 6 miles and mark that spot. And then he's going to label these because they're north. This is going to be 1 north, 2 north, and 3 north. So this is how the township was created. Each of these represents a township. 6 miles this way, 6 miles this way, 6 miles this way. So this township would be called 2 north, 2 west. Well, I know that N looks like a W, but 2 north, 2 west. Okay? This one would be 1 north, 1 west. So that's how these townships were created. Then the next thing they had to do is they had to then go east. Again, the 6 miles, make a marker, 6 miles, make a marker. And because this was east, this would be 1 east, 2 east, 3 east, and 4 east. So this would be 2 north, 3 east right here. 3 north, 3 east. Everybody got it? And then they had to go south. 6 miles, put a marker, 6 miles, put a marker, 6 miles, put a marker. So every one of these squares then represents a township. And remember, that was the order, to make these townships of 6 miles square. And they're described by, this would be 1 south, 2 south, 3 south. So this would be 2 south, 2 west. So that's really the easy part, because as I showed you that map in the beginning, this is going to be pretty clearly marked, the township and the range. But I just want you to understand, why it happened this way, how these townships were created. Now then, within each of these townships were further broken out into 6 miles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I didn't measure that out equally, but those 6 miles, and that would become the sections. The sections are within the township. So let me show you what those sections look like. So this is one township right here. And within that 6 mile township, there are breaks every 1 mile. So this is 1 mile, this is 2 miles, this is 3 miles, 4, 5, and 6. So that's our 6 miles. And these are numbered sections from 1 to 36. Now, what you need to realize, that many a landman has gotten tripped up because of this, and that is that you would think these would be numbered the way you read a book, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But what you notice right away is that the 1 starts on this side, not on this side, what would be logical. And so a lot of landmen, when they're trying to find the particular section, they'll start here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When in actuality, it starts with the 1. So the way it works is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, drop down to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, drop down to 13, 13 through 18, drop down to 19, etc., etc. So, you have to recognize that as a landman. It's not reading, like you would read a book. You got to know that it starts on this side and then goes to this side. Now, why would they put such a crazy system in place? Wouldn't it be more logical for them to have started at number 1 here, and then once they got to number 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, then to start over here at number 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then this would be 13, 14, right? Wouldn't that make more sense? So why didn't they do it that way? Why did they start on this end? Well, the reason was because, remember, they were coming from the east. So once they established that principal meridian, they're going to come up here and they're going to start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right? So that's how they're starting. They're coming from the east and they're going west. All right, so now they've walked these 6 miles, these 480 chains. Now what are they going to do? Are they going to come all the way back over here and start with the 7, 8, 9, 10? No, you're not going to make that horse go all the way back 6 miles so they can start here. That horse is just going to drop down 1 section, and then that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's going to be 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Same thing, drop down to 13. So that's what you have to recognize, is that's why this grid system is done the way it is. Now we can sit in our office in the year 2014 and say, geez, wouldn't it have been a whole lot easier for us in our air-conditioned office if they had just gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, too bad, so sad. Y'all are just going to have to put up with the fact that it doesn't appear logical to us. But I think that's why it's so important to know the history, is because if you know the history of it, then you understand why it's numbered the way it's numbered, and you don't get as confused. So that is the system of measuring out these sections. So then each of these sections are 1 mile each, and they're from sections 1 through 36. Again, this is not a difficult part of legal descriptions. This is going to be pretty clearly mapped on your map. But I do want to let you know about something called correction sections. If you cut out a piece of paper, if you cut this out, for example, and I had you glue this to a baseball, the result would be that it would have rumples in it at certain points because you're taking something flat and you're trying to put it onto something round. Well, that is the same problem that we have with the curvature of the Earth, because we're doing this grid system, but the Earth is curved. So sometimes sometimes the sections wouldn't be exactly 1 mile square. And so in order to accommodate for the changes that result as a curvature of the Earth, they would then add what's called these correction sections. And these correction sections go along the north side and along the west side. So these are divided out into lots. So along lot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 18, 19, 30, and 31. Section 1 has 4 lots. Section 2 has 4 lots. And so each of these has 4 lots until you get to 6. 6 has 4 lots and then 3 lots. And then so let me show you what that looks like. Is that each section 1 would have lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, lot 4. That's to accommodate for that curvature of the Earth. Same thing with section 2, section 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now notice on 6 has lot 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it also has 5, 6, and 7. It's the only one that has that. So it's got it both across the top and along the side. When we get back to 7, we go back to the 1, 2, 3, 4 lots. So I just wanted you to be familiar with that, because you'll hear people say lot 1 of section 1. And I just wanted you to know that that's how they are just accommodating for the curvature of the earth, is through these correction sections. All right, so once we have that, now we get to the tricky part. The tricky part is not the sections. The tricky part is not the township and range. The tricky part is the way the legal descriptions are, the actual section is divided out. So this is section 14. And then each section can be divided into halves, it can be divided into quarters, and it can be divided into quarter calls. So we could divide this in half, or we could divide it into quarters. So this would be the northwest quarter. This would be the northeast quarter. This would be the southeast quarter. And this would be the southwest quarter. This would be northwest. Okay? And so this would be a whole quarter here. And then one of these areas would be a quarter of the quarter. So that's what we call a quarter call. Northwest quarter of the northwest quarter. Okay, so let's look then at our beginning slide, that map that I was showing you. So you can see pretty clearly that the townships are designated. Here we go, here we go, and here we go. And then you can also see that these sections are marked. Now, I can't read these because my vision isn't that good, but these are each sections. So that's really the easy part. The township and range is easy, and the actual section's easy. So now let's talk about how we do those quarter calls. But the first thing we're going to tackle is the math side of it, because I want you to know how to calculate that acreage out. And it's really not anything that's difficult. So let's look at that, and that is going to be, here is section 1. Okay, now section 1 consists of 640 acres. Altogether, 640 acres. So if we divide that 640 into 4, 4 goes into 6, 1 times 4 is 4, 6 minus 4 is 2, that's 24. 6 times 4 is 24, carry that 0 down, and that's 160. So 640 acres divided by 4 is going to be 160 acres each. So this is 160, this is 160, this is 160, and this is 160. Everybody with me so far? These are called quarters. Okay? Now, these are designated by their location. So this corner over here is going to be the northeast corner. This is going to be the southeast corner. And what I do when I'm doing this is I'm thinking, okay, this is like Boston or Maine up here. Southeast is going to be Florida. This is just how I do it in my mind. Everyone has a different way of doing it. And this is going to be the northwest, like Portland, Oregon. And then this is going to be the southwest, like California or Arizona. So now we have the designations. Each of these quarters is 160 each, right? Now we could divide it in half, and that 640 divided in 2 would be 2 goes into 6 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. And then we got the 40. 2 goes into 40 20 times. So that's 320. If we just divided it in half, the north half would be 320 and the south half would be 320. Okay? So that's dividing it in halves. Now let's look at quarters. Remember we said each of these is a quarter, so they're each 160 acres each. Now we can take that 160, and that would be the northeast, and we can divide it in half. So we're dividing 160 in half. What's that going to be? That's going to be 80. Half of 160 is 80. So this side is going to be 80 acres, and this side is going to be 80 acres. Okay? Now we can divide that 80 in half. If we divide that 80 in half, let's look at it over here in the southwest quarter. We're dividing that 80 in half. That means each of these halves are going to be 40 acres each. That's the quarter. A quarter of the quarter is going to be 40 acres. Then we can further divide these 40 acres into halves, and that's going to give us 20 acres. Now, we could also divide these 20 acres in halves, and that would give us 10 acres each. And we could divide those 10 in half, and that would give us 5 acres each. And we can even divide that 5 acres in half, and that would be 2.5 acres each. So you see how specifically we can calculate the acreage out. But it's really simple. Once you know we start with 640 acres and we're dividing that in 4, then we could divide that in half. We could divide the half in half, the half and half and half, and then the half and half and half and half to get to the 10. So really the math part of it, the calculations part of it is really pretty simple because it's really logical. You're just dividing 160. So let me show you then how this would be written, and we'll get to the platting part of it. So this would be written, could be written either as the northwest quarter with a slash, or it could be written just NW4 with no slash, or it could just be written as NW. All of these are exactly the same thing. They're just using different designations. Same thing here. This could be written either as the northeast/4 or just the northeast 4 or just the northeast. All those are the same thing. And you'll see it written differently on different instruments, different leases, those kind of things. So that is the northwest of the northwest, northeast of the northeast of the northeast. So I just want you to know when you see these written different ways, they really all mean the same thing. They're just written different ways. I just got a question here from Jose. Are all the correction sections a standard size? And Jose, the answer is yes, but I don't know what that standard size is. That's a good question. I'll need to look that up. But yeah, they're all a standard size. Yeah, I can't remember what that is, but good question. Okay, so now we're doing the math, and now I'm going to show you how to plat it. So we've taken this 160, we've divided it in half, all right? And so because this is in the northeast quarter, the back of the description is going to say northeast quarter. Now, this is the west half of the northeast quarter, and this is the east half of the northeast quarter. And so this is going to look like this. This is what that property description is going to look at. East half, northeast quarter, west half, northeast quarter. That's 80 acres. You're taking that northeast quarter and you're dividing it by 2. 80 acres. Now let's look at the southwest quarter. And we know that's 160. Now if we divide this 160 into 4, we know 4 goes into 16 4 times, so that's going to be 40 acres each, right? And then this is how we're going to describe it. Because it's in the southwest quarter, here it is in the southwest quarter, the very end of each of these descriptions is going to say southwest quarter. So let's just take a look at that. And we know these are 40 acres, but this is going to be the southwest quarter. I'm just going to go ahead and put those at the end of each of these. And then this is going to be the what? This is going to be the northwest of the southwest. This is going to be the northeast of the southwest. This is going to be the southeast of the southwest. And this is the southwest of the southwest. So that they'll look like this. Now this is what we call a quarter call. Quarter. And a quarter is you're taking that quarter, which is 160, and you're dividing it into 4. That's 40 acres each. So this is called the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter. This is the northeast quarter of the southwest quarter, the southwest quarter of the southwest quarter, and the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter. Okay? So now we're going to move on to the southeast. So anytime there's a description in the southeast quarter, southeast is going to be at the very end of it. So let's divide this 40 into half. And that's going to be our 20 acres each, right? And then everything is going to, every part of this area is going to have this designation at the end of it. So we'll just put southeast at the end of all of these. And then we're going to divide the southeast into the northwest, the northeast, the southeast, and the southwest. So again, southeast. Now I'm just going to put the northeast of the southeast, the northeast of the southeast. See, this is the northeast of that southeast. This is going to be the northwest of the, oh, sorry. And then we're dividing that in half. So then that's going to be the east half, northeast, southeast. And this is going to be the northwest, southeast, northwest, southeast, northwest, southeast. And then again, we're going to do the west half and the east half. East half, west half. That is incorrect. This should be the east half. If you would make that correction or be aware of that. And this is the west half. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the southeast. This is going to be the northeast of the southeast, northeast of the southeast, and then again we're going to go east half and west half, and those again should be reversed. Sorry about that. And then the same thing here, northwest, northwest, east half and the west half. Oh man, I'm doing a great job here. Sorry about that, guys. This is the east, okay? So these would all be 20 acres. So that what you have as a result is, if you want to do this in half, then you're doing east half, west half. Okay, so you've got your northwest quarter, that's 160 acres. We divide that in half. That's going to be called the west half of the northeast and the east half of the northeast. And those are 80 acres each, 160 divided by 2, 80 acres. And then we're going to go to the southwest quarter. This is the northwest of the southwest. This is the northeast of the southwest. This is the southwest of the southwest. And this is the southeast of the southwest. That's going to be 40 acres each. Then we further divide that into the west half of the northwest of the southeast and the east half of the northwest. See, I got that one right. Now this one is going to be north-south because we're dividing this part into north and this part into south. So that's going to be the north half of the northeast of the southeast, and this is going to be the south half of the northeast of the southeast. And then you could break that down into 5s, 10s, and then ultimately 2.5s. So when you're trying to read a description, the trick is, the secret is that you read it backwards. So if you read this backwards, Sylvia's asking if I can go back to the last screen. This, Sylvia, is this what you're interested in? Okay. Bottom right, okay. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we're going to go on and talk about how you would read this description. So the question is, where is the north half of the southwest quarter? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to read this backwards. You're going to start with this southwest here. So you know that this description is going to be in the southwest quarter. So here's that southwest quarter, and then it's going to be the north half of it. So you're just dividing that southwest quarter into half. So here's your southwest. You're dividing it in half, and this is the north half of the southwest. Does everybody see that? Okay, and then how many acres is this? Anybody write me a question and tell me how many acres this is. How many acres is the north half of the southwest? Yes, Tammy got it. Anybody else? Crystal, good job. Sylvia, you're close, but not quite. Anybody else want to guess? Okay, the answer is 80, right? Yeah, here we go. Jose and Daryl just weighed in at 80 because this is 160, okay? And we just divided it in half. So half of 160 is going to be 80. Good, Sylvia. Okay, so let's do another one. Again, we're just going to read it backwards. That's the secret here. So the next one is going to go, now I'm going to use the actual terminology that we use. And that is plat. So the question would be plat the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter. So I'm going to read this backwards. So I know that this is going to be in the northeast quarter over here. And then I'm just going to divide that northeast quarter into quarters. And where is the northwest quarter here? It's right here. See, it's northwest over here. It's right here. So this would be the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter. How many acres is in the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter? Come on, y'all can do this. Lee got it. Sylvia got it. Eldris got it. Idris got it. Oh, look at y'all. Y'all are doing great. Okay, so Daryl got it. James, Anthony, Jose, Andrea, Carlin, and Ben all got it. Great. All right. Y'all are catching on to this. See, it's really not hard. I mean, the math part is really not hard. And neither is this once you realize that you have to read it backwards. So let's then look at another example. This is going to be plat the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter. So I want y'all to take out a piece of paper and I want y'all to draw a section like this. And in these corners, I want you to put the northwest, the northeast, the southeast, and the southwest. And I want y'all to show where this northwest quarter of the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter is. Draw it on your paper. And then I want you to tell me how many acres that is. So I'm going to give you just a few minutes to do that. Again, read it backwards. I'm seeing some good answers. Okay, does everybody have it written on their paper? I think they know where it is. All right, I'm getting discrepancy between 10 acres and 20 acres. I'm seeing both. So what is the actual answer? Well, this is where it's located. Going in the northeast, and we're dividing that into 4, and that's going to be the southeast quarter. So right now, you know, these are 40 acres each, right? 40 times 4 is 160. So now I've got that divided into 4, and now I'm going to go into the northwest of that. I'm dividing that into 4, and then the northwest is going to be here. Okay, so if this is 40 acres, and this is a quarter of the 40 acres, 4 goes into 40 10 times. Right? 10, 20, 30, 40. Everybody with me? Okay. So what some people do is they'll start with this northeast and say, okay, I know the northeast is 160. I'm going to divide that northeast into 4. Now I'm at now I'm at 40, and then I'm going to divide that 40 by 4. And that gives me the 10. So that's one way that people do it, is that they'll just kind of use the 4s to figure out what the calculations is, the calculation of the acreage. So that's a trick that you can use if you get stuck, or it's a great way just to double check yourself. Okay, so that's where the northwest quarter, the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter is. All right, now let's do another one. Now, this is something called the comma rule. Comma, C-O-M-M-A. And what happens when you see a comma in a legal description is that designates 2 separate tracts. So this would be tract 1 and this would be tract 2. So you're not going to start in the northeast. See, this was northeast, southeast, northwest. That's this description, northeast, southeast, northwest. But what we're doing instead is now we're adding a comma here. And let me show you what a different result you get. So we've got a comma. Now I'm going to do this the same way that I do the other ones. I'm just going to read it backwards. So I'm going to start here, just going to start from the back. That's just easier for me. And I know it's going to be in the northeast quarter because there's the northeast quarter. So this is going to be the northeast quarter, which is 160. I'm going to divide that into 4, and that's going to be 40. So the southeast is going to be, everybody see where I'm going with this? The southeast is going to be the 160 divided by 4. This is the southeast of the northeast, okay? That is one tract. The next tract is this northwest quarter. So this would be tract 1, this would be tract 2. So once you see that comma in there, we're designating 2 different areas. So if you're taking a lease from a landowner and they have 2 separate tracts in a section, let's say all this is owned by other people, but they own this tract and this tract, you would put that on the same lease. You would just designate it as northwest quarter, comma, and then the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter. A lot of people get tripped up because they don't know what that comma means. And so they end up with it looking like this. Yeah, well, let me see. With it looking like this. And that would be incorrect. All right, so did we say how many acres this was? All right, this is going to be how many acres? This northwest quarter is how many acres? Okay, I'm seeing some 200s in here. This whole quarter here is going to be 160 acres. Oh, you're adding them all together. Okay, I gotcha. Right. All right. So this is going to be 160 divided by 4 divided by 4. Now it's going to be 20 acres. I gotcha. See how I'm doing? 160 is the northwest. That's right. So this is going to be 160. This is going to be 40. Right? A quarter of a quarter. So this is going to be 40 acres. Is everybody with me? Right. So if this is 40, 160 plus 40, that's what y'all are doing. I'm with you. It's going to be 200 acres all together. Does everybody see that? Excellent. Excellent. Okay, we're going to do one more. This also has a comma in it. And this one is plat the west half of the northeast quarter and the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter. So I want y'all to take out a piece of paper right now, and I want you to divide that paper into 4, and then in each corner, I want you to put these designations. And I want to see if y'all can come out where this is located in this section, and how many acres are in each tract, and then what the total acres are. So I'm going to give you 1 minute to do this. No, let me give you 30 seconds to do this. Okay, raise your hand if you think you've got it. Jose thinks he's got it. Do you have it written out, Jose? Okay, anybody else can tell me the acreage? What is the total acreage here? So if this is tract 1 and this is tract 2, what is tract 1? Yay, that's right. 80 and 40. That's right. 80 and 40 equal 120. Y'all are doing great. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like. Doo-doo-doo. So I'm going to start here with the southwest. I'm going to go to the northwest quarter. So this is where that's located. And the next one is the west half of the northeast. And that's here. So I'm going to start with the northeast here. I'm going to go to the west half here. So the west half of the northeast is going to be 80 acres. And 1/4 of 160 is going to be 40 acres. So 80 plus 4 is 120. All right, one more, and then I'll, oh, no, that was it. So what I usually do in a class then is I would then write some on the board and have them, see if they could plat it out. Now in the class, what I would do in the professional land management class is that I would have a calculation worksheet for you to work on. And, I never see anybody that has that much trouble with it. But if you do have trouble with it, I can pick up the phone and call you, or you can call me and I can walk you through it. Or we could just set up a little mini webinar where it's just you and I, and we could walk through it. So that is legal descriptions. Does everybody feel like they have a really good handle on this? Okay, Jose's question. How do you describe the correction sections? So Jose, those correction sections would be lot 1, 2, 3, 4. Lot 1, section 1, 4 north, 4 west, or whatever the township and range is. So it's lot 1, section 1, or lot 3, section 2. So that's how they're tied together. Good, good. Any other questions on this? Everybody's in good shape. Okay, well, let's talk about what we talked about today. We started off with an introduction, and I told you the impact of why it's so important that we get these legal descriptions done correctly. And we said that this is the #1 cause of title failure is an inaccurate or an incorrect legal description in a conveyance instrument. And if it's in an oil and gas lease, it can actually void the lease itself. So very important, check it, double check it. It looks complicated because it's the northwest or the southwest or the southeast or the southeast, whatever it is, but take your time, check it, double check it. Then we looked at the history of U.S. land ownership. I don't know if I told you, but I'm a history major, so we're all going to get some history in here. And I told you about the 2 types of legal description, metes and bounds. That's what the original colonists brought over from England. And then we talked about congressional. That is Thomas Jefferson's system that he invented, also known as Jeffersonian, and the rectangular survey system. And so I showed you how these poor, surveyors have to walk the land, do 6 miles for the township, 1 mile for the each section. And then we talked about how to divide out those acreage. So then we calculated, in other words, said how many acres were in each section. And then we actually platted that acreage, that is, we showed where it was on the section. And then that wraps up our presentation. So for those of you that are interested in the University of Houston Professional Land Management Certificate Program, now this is not the University of Houston downtown, this is the University of Houston main campus. So if you're interested in that, the first class begins on February 2nd. Okay, are there any other questions? No problem. Sylvia, that question is, I am not sure how I would draw that out. I'm not that great at the metes and bounds. In other words, I don't know how to do the minutes and the seconds part of it. So, yes, Carlton, this is an online class. So this would be at your convenience. It takes about, I would say, 12 hours a month to take the class. You've got at least 1 live webinar like this one a week. And if you can't make it to that live webinar, it's going to be recorded, just like this is recorded. And I'll be sending you this link. And, then you can watch it whenever you want. But yes, Daryl, the whole focus of this is for oil and gas leasing. The job of a landman is to chain the title out to find out who the current mineral owner is, and then go and take a lease from that mineral owner. That is what gives the oil and gas company permission to go onto the land to drill and develop. So that's the whole focus of it, is really the role of a landman. Sylvia, does the first reference to direction, the point of reference, and the last directional? I don't know if they have anything on real estate management, Daryl. Oh, is the first, okay, thank you. Is the first reference to direction the point of reference, and the last direction the direction of the tracing of the survey line? No, this class, Janice, is Sylvia. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. I'm not able to answer that. Each class is 1 month, so there's 6 modules, and each module is 1 month. So when you finish taking all 6 modules, then you'll get your certificate. Now, every module, the 1 month module, takes about 12 hours to complete. So if you currently have a job, if you're currently working, you know, it's really easy to, well, not easy, but it's manageable. I mean, there's 12 weeks or 12 hours. So the whole course is actually 6 months, Janice. Oh, cool. Sylvia, we have someone here that's saying that you can send him your email. He knows how to do the degree minutes seconds part. He's a civil engineer. Brilliant. Okay, so let me, Sylvia, would that be okay if I sent you Jose's information? And by the way, this is how the class works. I mean, this is about networking. I don't know everything there is to know. So a lot of times someone, like Jose just did, will chime in and say, hey, I know about that. So if you want to contact him, Sylvia, his address, his email address is jovellard@hotmail.com. So that's J for Jose, Ovelard. Oh, I'm sorry, that's his last name, Velarde. So Jose O. Velarde. Oh, no E on that end. Okay, so here it is again, JOVLARD @hotmail.com. Oh, this looks cool. Hang on. Since you are a history person, I wanted to share this is where we received our land from, in Lavaca County, Texas. Oh, Sylvia, his phone number is 267-303-2517. Thank you so much, Jose. That is so nice of you. Are there any other questions? Thank you, Sylvia. Crystal, as far as materials to review, the AAPL has a study guide, and I may use that as our text, but it's not very well written. I should say it's written by experts, so I don't think it's really hard to understand. Okay, thanks, Carlin. I got that. So I don't know. I can't really think of anything for you to read. I'm actually working on a book myself, so but I'm hoping it'll be ready by February, but maybe not. Okay, well, you guys were great. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments about the class or about this topic? Okay, and y'all can always reach me at my email address is ahoge, that's H-O-G-E, at landtraining.net. So y'all have been a great audience, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Carlin. Good, Crystal. I look forward to having you as well. Tammy, thank you. Janice, cool. You're welcome, Anthony. You're welcome, Jose. I feel like I'm on Romper Room. Okay, anybody else? Okay, great. All right, guys, have a great rest of your day or evening.